Welcome to the Accounting Arc Podcast, where analysis, reaction, and comedy collide to tackle the big topics from the world of accounting and beyond. Join our trio of transformation agents as they discuss the hottest topics in and out of the profession, from breaking down industry trends, to reacting to everyday events, to uncovering the hidden humor in numbers. With wisdom, insight, and a dash of levity, they're proving that accounting isn't just about the numbers. It's about life. Because after all, accounting is in everything. The Accounting Arc Podcast starts now.
Welcome back to another episode of ARC. Today, we'll be talking about what our first jobs were in accounting and why they were important and all the fun things that we got to do. I know each of us has had a unique, but at the same time, stereotypical upbringing in accounting, and each of us has taken a different path. And, I think everyone that joins this profession has these opportunities and can do some very interesting and also sometimes when you look back at it in retrospect, unique opportunities inside of what we can do for any industry across the board. So let's jump in, guys. What was your first accounting job? And then I have follow-up questions.
Donny, would you like to go or should I jump in?
Go ahead.
All right. You're so right, Liz. It's really funny because I think people think that accounting roles and jobs are just kind of these bland things. And I bet every accountant we know has like some fun stories. My first accounting internship, so I was in college and I went to school on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, so near the beach. And at the beach, there is a family-owned company, two brothers that owned 13 hotels and 4 restaurants in Ocean City, Maryland. So I worked in the accounting office. There was a lot going on in there, and it gave me such interesting insights into just the operations of a lot of businesses, everything from, tanking every liquor bill that came through to true it up and put the accounts payable in, to even, I mean, this is hard to believe, but collecting the cash bags from the hotels. They literally had a little car that they would send me out in, college student, to go to all 13 hotels and get the cash bag from each hotel. I'd throw it in the back of the car, drive to the next one, pull up, and just run around with, hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash. Because mind you, this was also in the 90s. So it was not a lot of credit card transactions going on. There was a lot of cash going on. And, bringing that back.
I couldn't even imagine like paying for a hotel room in cash nowadays.
Right?
Like,
no,
that's insane. Did you have to sign like a bunch of "I'm not going to steal from you" paperwork?
No, I look back on it and it's just I probably should have, well, I probably should not have, but I could have easily just driven off one day after maybe like a holiday weekend, July 4th weekend. I mean, those were some fat bags. And no, they trusted me to go out and, drive through
There
the
had to be
street.
controls though, too, right? Like
Yeah,
someone was reconciling the deposits, right?
Oh, 100. Yeah. I mean, there were
Oh, okay.
controls and each bag was locked. It wasn't just like a grocery bag of cash. It was like actual cash bags that were locked. And, I would bring them back. I would hand them off to somebody else who had the key, who would, check them. And there were controls in place, but I didn't sign a single thing. I didn't have a like armored truck to like
Yeah.
drive around. No
No
weapons.
defense. Yeah.
No, I was some unassuming college kid with, a big pile of cash in the back of my like
Well, that's fun.
Chrysler. Yeah. So, but there were like all kinds of things that I got involved in seeing the operations, and even to the point where I would help the CFO use gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the name, but a reporting program to help
Crystal
do the
reports.
consolidated. So it wasn't Crystal reports.
No.
It was like FX reports or
Oh,
something like
yes,
that.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we were building consolidated financial statements for 13 restaurant or 13 hotels and restaurants, and like it was some really cool stuff. I just got like just different elements of so much of business. It got me excited about accounting because I was like, look at all this cool stuff, and you just see it happen, and you look at the number of employees that are involved and the number of like people's livelihoods that you're supporting through running these organizations. It was a fascinating experience.
Follow-up question. What was your favorite part of that job?
What was my favorite? So I would say my favorite part of that job was this will be no surprise. I should have known then. Was the controller was kind of an IT person as well. So we would go help like set up computers in the different hotels for like the operations people. So actually getting involved with like setting up the computers and troubleshooting them and those types of things, which at the time I had no idea that my career would end up going down this technology path. It was just like this side thing of doing accounting work.
Mhm.
But yeah, it foreshadowed a lot that I didn't realize at the time.
That's fantastic. So Donnie, what was your first accounting job and what did that look like?
I'm kind of actually debating how to answer this because so my first accounting job, like where I got paid, was actually between my junior and senior year in high school.
Oh wow.
Um, it was yeah, it was part of like a voc tech or vocational education program at the time, where for that summer I actually went and did was an effectively an accounts payable clerk at a logistics company. So, but I'm like, I don't, it's not that interesting because what did I do? I did a lot of data entry. Turns out I was really good at like 10 keying because that was mostly what you were doing. Um, and we would look at like what freight was brought in, what trucks it was put on, what trucks it went out on, right? So it was a lot of that. I learned about month-end close and I kind of got to see how, oh, we gotta get all these things in. But that was kind of it. So I'm gonna actually bridge to my first internship in college, which actually, funny enough, actually parallels some of Byron's. So I
Wow.
actually interned at Coopers and Lybrand. I was an IT intern, and effectively, the very first thing I did was deploy laptops, new laptops, um, with Omni Pro and the Lotus suite of applications, including what was it, Lotus 123 as the spreadsheet. And we were giving these out to effective, actually, it was to the auditors, because we were swapping them out. Now, I think the laptops were about yay big
With the screen about this
and
big
like
on
this
them.
thick, if I remember correctly. And Coopers at that time was one of the more forward. So the other thing we were rolling out at that time was the paperless audit
Oh
system.
wow.
Yeah. I remember it was called Class, the Coopers and Lybrand. I think it was Audit Support System or something like that. And it was all Lotus Notes based, and we were rolling that out to all these auditors. So it was interesting technology again related. Felt super forward at that time because everything else, you would see these really big like paper, what do you call them? File bags that they would carry. And then we would give them these really big laptops and laptop bags that they would have to carry too.
And also, for those of you that don't know what Cooper's Lybrand is, it is now PwC, which was formed in 1998 when Price Waterhouse and Cooper's Lybrand merged. Thought that was a good history
Way
lesson for
back.
those of
Yeah,
our
for
listeners
sure.
that were like, what is this firm he's speaking of? It sounds like I should know it. Well, it is now part of a bigger firm. That's
Yeah,
pretty cool, though.
not as interesting necessarily, but definitely at the forefront of technology again.
because we
What
were
was your
running wires and do all that kind of stuff in the office as well.
Yep.
what was your favorite part?
Favorite part of that internship? Actually, we were actually dealing with some pretty at that time leading edge technology. So the Lotus Notes was, and actually I still think it's pretty cool. You don't see it very often anymore, but it was all text based. It was able to do
Yep.
what we think of today as synchronization, which was not common. This is late 90s, or no, this is mid 90s. So it was not very common back then to see technologies that could do that. We were rolling out laptops to everybody. That was pretty forward at the time.
Oh yeah. Big time.
You did all your work papers electronically, stored them all in these Lotus Notes databases. They all synchronized. I mean, things that we take as for granted and kind of the common today. Those were interesting, but I think the thing that was most interesting in that was really being able to be at that forefront. So the other historical dating, it was a Novell NetWare
Oh
3.5
yeah.
network that we took to a 4.1, I think it was, at that. And these were all kind of leading edge. So the thing that was fun for me was I was actually taking my MIS course, my networking course at the time in college.
Oh
And
fun.
the professor, who was this notoriously hard professor, was sitting up there doing his lecture, blah, blah, blah. And these are the commands. And I was like raising my hand, we work with that. That's not the command we use at my office. And he hated me, I know, after that, because I was like, well, that actually won't work. You need to do this instead.
That's awesome.
He's
Because
like,
I
I learned this in a textbook, and you're like, no, practically speaking, you're wrong.
I tried to run that at my office, and that doesn't work. You got to do this instead.
That's so funny.
That's awesome.
Well,
So
And
Liz, tell us about yours.
yeah, so I started also as an intern, but I was in college. I didn't do any accounting internships in high school. I was too busy being a ski instructor and playing, basically. But yeah, so in college, I had an internship. My first internship was with a firm in Reno, Nevada. I worked with Grant Thornton, and I stayed there for my first job as well. So I started and in Nevada, you had to have a certain number of audit hours and get to a certain level to get your CPA license. And so I was a general intern. So I did both tax and audit, and then transitioned into the tax department full time. But I still had to get my hours and in charge and audit. So I had to do a ton of audit hours as well. It's a whole thing, and took a lot of time and effort. But my first real engagements were on casino audits. So that
Wow.
was definitely a very interesting space to play and to learn and get your feet wet. And so, what they had us do as interns to start was observations, right? The base level thing that you can give a checklist and a clipboard and tell a baby auditor, hey, go do these things. Here's a whole list, the things you have to watch, the things you have to do. And in a casino, those observations were cash counts and drops. And that's where I started. And so a cash drop is when you walk the floor and you drop every cash from all of the slot machines, from the tables, and different sections of the casino were dropped at different times. As you can imagine, there's a big security contingent that accompanies that. It was not, just some college intern that's allowed to drop all the cash. And as an auditor, you are not allowed to touch any of it. You just have to observe all of the drops and what they're doing. And then all of that money gets taken to account room, and there's a team that then counts all the cash. And so, as a baby auditor, had my clipboard. I would go observe the drops one day. I'd observe the counts another day, and we had a whole schedule of what we did and when, which ones we had to be on the floor for, which ones we had to be in a surveillance room for, and which ones we had to actually be in the cash room for. My favorite and least favorite were the cash room counts. So normally what happens is, you walk in, they do like a full metal detector, pat down, whatever. You're only allowed to
Wow.
walk in with like you, and I was allowed to take my clipboard because I had to take notes, right? And that was it. So you can't take a cell phone. You can't take anything at all, basically, not even like a water bottle would they let you take into the count room. And anytime you touch anything, you have to like put your hands up to the cameras because people are watching you at all times. So like if I moved, I'd have to like put my clipboard down, put my hands out, show that I didn't have any cash in my hands, and then move on with whatever I was doing. And so there was like a fair bit of like, this is how you act around money. And this is what you have to do to even be allowed into the count room. And then, we had a list from the gaming control board that had to be observed quarterly and then annually, because the audit firms had to sign off on, this casino's in compliance with their controls. They also had internal auditors. So they had internal and external auditors that all had to do these observations as well as sign offs and ensuring everything was good. And there was one day, I can tell you, so normally the cash counts were a couple hours. So you'd sit there for a couple hours, watch them count the cash, make sure there was nothing weird, make sure they were like putting down the right numbers. And they had, the machines that they would run the money through that would count it. And they had controls where it would be like most of the casinos anyways. One person would do it, another person would verify, and then they'd write the number down, have their tally, and then that tally would be taken to the accounting department, signed off on. Well, I was in account room for 15 hours one day because their cash counting machines broke. And they had to count the entire casino. This was a year-end count. It was not just like a random day count. It was a year-end observation. They had to count the entire cash drop from New Year's Eve by hand. And I had to watch it for 15 hours. It was so painful and awful. And also, I don't think I've ever seen that much cash since in my life. But it was, a few $1 million they had to count in like by hand and then verify by hand. So that one was awful. And the good casinos had really high quality counting machines that worked well. That one, unfortunately, the machine broke down and there was no way to get a new one on a holiday. Yep. So that was the big part of my first internship and first job. There was other stuff we did with casinos, that's just part of it. That's where you start, right? Is having to do the part. And of course, it's like 2:00 in the morning, right? Like they don't do these things like in the middle of a workday, right? It's when nobody's around. It's after the, shift goes off. It's 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 2 a.m., right? It's the middle of the night. And it's really inconvenient times. And I do remember one other audit, we had to go out to the middle of nowhere in Nevada to a casino. And we had actually 3 casinos in the same casino group in this small town in the middle of Nevada. And the team, the in charge was like, look, I don't want to be here. You guys don't want to be here. There's 4 of us. There's 3 casinos. We're going to get through like 10 observations in the next 2 days. Basically, we're not sleeping. You have an unlimited budget for coffee and snacks. And we have 2 days to get this done. If you can find a break in the middle of the day when there were no counts or observations going on, like there's a hotel room for you, but otherwise just power through. We're driving back at this time, get it done. And so we basically, all of us stayed up for 48 hours doing observations and taking notes. And in retrospect, that was really dumb because I feel like we probably weren't in our best headspace to do that after being awake for that long. But at the same time, we got a whole lot of work done very quickly. And then we got to go home and take a few days off because, the rest of the work week didn't matter at that point. But of course, it was a weekend. It was awful. But yeah.
That's incredible.
These are the fun things that happen with accounting.
So after the observations, did you get to do anything else with the accounting at the casinos?
Yeah, so the observations were really like the first piece that they make auditors do, right? When you're learning, when you're trying to figure out like, do I want this as a career? And it's kind of like a test of strength. Like if you can get through this BS, you can hang, right? And so, I clearly am very stubborn and very strong as a personality. So I was like, I'm going to be the best at observations. Like my observations were always clean. I had the best notes, like everything was done early on time, like delivered. And so because of that, I was picked to be on some of the better casino audits for busy season. And so the quarterly observations, then you have the annual observations, then that leads into like a full audit, right? And so, we did normal audit activities, audited every cycle of accounting for the casinos, but then we also got to do things like figure out the ratios that the house was taking on table games and see if there was a statistical difference from last year, right? And figure out like, did anything change in the business operations, right? And so one of the things I got to do that I thought was super fun was there was a huge discrepancy between the craps take for one casino, like all their craps tables for 1 year versus the year we were auditing. And I was like, this is very statistically significant. And so I brought it up to, the manager of the audit, and I was like, hey, like, I don't think I can just say, hey, same as last year, because it's like a 20% difference. And he's looking at it and he's like, yeah, that's really significant. Like, we need to figure out what happened, what they did, if there was anything that was changed or whatnot. And so he's like, go talk to the pit boss. I'm like, okay. So I go up to the floor and I go to the pit boss and I'm like, hey, like, I need to understand why these numbers changed from last year to this year. Like, you oversee the craps tables. Like, what's the difference? And he was like, oh, yeah, we just advertised really well for really inexperienced gamblers. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, oh, yeah, we've had busloads of tourists come to the casino specifically for craps that don't know how to play. And I'm like, is that real life? Like, that's what, and he's like, oh, yeah, no, all year. And he's like, I'll show you like the logs of tourist buses that we've had, right? And most of these people are foreign travelers from other countries. Like they barely speak English, never mind like know how to gamble and like play the system. And traditionally before that, most of their craps players were locals that knew what they were doing, that would show up every day, that would play like the odds and understand how to play craps and what that looked like. And so they're really rich foreign travelers on their tour buses increased their profit margin so significantly that I had to write a memo about it. And not only did I have to write a memo about it, I had to go research like, hey, did this actually happen? Like, when did these buses come through? Can I correlate the timeline for when the buses were to the revenue intake? Can I find the documentation for that? So it was this whole like forensic accounting, basically exploration of, okay, what documentation can I line this up? Does it actually correlate? Is this a causation? And how do I prove that statistically and then in a memo form to get through the audit?
That's
So
funny.
there's some fun things that I got to do on top of just like boring stuff. We also did like SOX auditing. That was awful. It's more checklists and like going and looking at tons of paperwork. I got to do the legal review on a few casinos. That was cool. I also understood why the manager had like a list of hotel rooms he refused to stay in after doing the legal review.
Yeah, you gotta clean that one.
Right.
So it's Las Vegas, right? Like we were doing audits in Las Vegas. That term, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Like there's some really awful things that happen in Vegas. And some of them end up with the police department, which ends up in, the general counsel's office. Some of it ends up in lawsuits. And, I like everything from prostitutes being murdered in hotel rooms to bed bug lawsuits. That one was really common. To suicides, to drug overdoses. I mean, like the gambit of what could happen did happen. Even some like hostage situations.
Wow.
Kidnappings happened. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of stuff that goes down in casinos, and I like nobody wanted to do the legal review because you basically just have to sit there and read for days. And I was like, well, first off, I love reading, and second off, I'm fascinated by everything that could happen from the legal perspective. And like the general counsel for that particular casino was a really cool guy, so I was like, I'll go sit in his office and read everything. Like, let me go see all the open pending stuff and what's going on. So. But of course, you had to read it all and then document it all and explain like why it was a risk from a financial perspective or why it wasn't. And then also if they had estimated what they think the liability in the future was correctly and how they estimated it. And, like the likelihood that these things were going to happen. And that, of course, is like very subjective and you have to rely on the GC quite a bit. And very occasionally there were issues that we had to bring outside counsel in on and say, hey, in your expert opinion, what's going to happen with this, right? Um, but yeah, no, it was fun to do the gap analysis of like, hey, this is the potential future liability, why we're accruing it now, why we're not. And then also looking at like the historical cases that had happened, how they closed, right? What happened there. But there's a lot that happens. I mean, there's a lot that happens in any standard hotel, but you add in a casino and you add
Oh
in
yeah,
Vegas and you add in these like levels and layers of things, and it just gets exponentially more interesting.
that is fascinating. That's definitely
Yeah, so
a
not
fun one.
typical, but yeah, if you're a baby accountant and you're like, I want to do something weird with my time, go get a job at a Las Vegas firm or a Reno firm and be like, casino auditing, sign me up. Gaming is such a very specialized area. And honestly, like if you're good at it, you can do extraordinarily well at a career just in gaming auditing.
I'll flip that a little because I think part of the point, which I don't think a lot of people realize in our profession, is that if there's another industry in general that you're interested in, like that might be part of the criteria for which firm you go and work with. So like when one of the things I got to actually do was even though I was based in Hawaii, we had a client that owned a vineyard in Napa and actually really deep Napa Valley. So once a year, our auditors and I actually got to go once because they were like, oh, they're using a computer. So this is when I was more on the IT audit side. They're like, we better send you to go look at it. So we had to drive on those windy roads to go all the way back to the vineyard. And our team they had a house on the vineyard ranch or a lot, like a lodge type, not lodge, yeah, lodge, actually, it's a lodge. Because it had like the great room, it had bedrooms all off of the sides, and literally where there's like, when it became night, it was black, and all you saw was stars. It was so great. Um, but they were out there counting cows. Luckily, I just had to interview people about the systems. But what I actually got to learn about was how the manufacturing process of the wine, how the computers actually were integrated, and how they use the data from that to determine the inventory and the movement of inventory. But as part of that, the really cool thing was that we actually had the winemaker give us a course. So he
Oh,
actually
cool.
had, because I had to understand how do you actually make wine. So they actually talked me through, okay, this is what's happening in this one, this is what's happening there, this is where we would actually taste it, this is how we work with the varietals. So they explained like the whole winemaking process, how that tied into the manufacturing systems, how that data was then used on the accounting side to actually do the inventory management and valuation. And then we actually got to have a dinner where they actually taught us about the different wines. That was actually the coolest one. We were at the actual winery owners or vineyard owners' house. And because there's nothing else out there, that was kind of it. They were like, yeah, they make dinner for us. And so he actually taught us this is how you taste the differences. This is what the things were. And of course, we got to buy like a case for really cheap, and I brought that home because that was that was it. And I loved wines, and after that, I even loved it even more. And even till today, that winery was known for their Petite Sirah. To today, that's my favorite varietal.
That's fine.
That's so
I'm
cool.
picturing you like I Love Lucy in the big like thing, like smashing the grapes with your feet.
That's not something I would do, but there's machines that do it for you now, Byron. Actually, that was in the
Yeah.
90s, so back then they had machines that do it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can imagine. I can imagine.
Has
But you're
little feet that
absolutely
go like,
right. But you're absolutely right. I think I've known so many people who have done accounting in sports industry, like CFO for the Baltimore Orioles or those types of things. There is so many aspects if you are fascinated or interested in these different domains. All of them have accountants and accountants in those roles. So there's really an endless amount of places that you can go and get that deep understanding and knowledge, which is a lot
Yeah.
of fun.
The other thing to consider for anyone considering a career in accounting, um, go to an industry that makes money. Just gonna put that there because you are going to either be internal overhead or an external like vendor if you're an auditor or a tax person, which is calculated as overhead and fees are negotiated. So if you are like, I am in love with this industry, but there is no money in this industry, I'm going to go be an accountant there. There's no money in being an accountant there either because they're not making money, right? So just be smart about it when you're thinking about it. Sports industries are great, casinos are great, in most years, vineyards are great, right? In some years, not so much, but think about that from the prospect of what's today and then also what's tomorrow, right? Because I think with the way technology is being developed, a lot of industries that we're used to existing are going to transform in a way we're not sure what that's going to look like yet, right? But I do think consumer brands, right, that isn't going anywhere. We're still going to have people on this planet consuming things. So it's just the distribution logistics side that'll change, but the brands will still be there. Thinking about like real estate. Real estate's always going to exist and it's only getting more limited, which means profit margins increase, right? Because supply demand. Um, but think about things like experiences, like gaming's an experience. It definitely is. Going to hotels, like they'll still exist. Restaurants will still exist. People still want to be out and about because we're humans. But at the end of the day, some of the service industries that we look at and some other pieces of our current economy are just not going to look the same in the future.
Well, no doubt. And there will be new ones that don't exist today that you can't even anticipate. And I think that is also the beauty of the accounting path is it's so easy to pick up that knowledge and transfer it to new domains that show up or new things, new types of businesses, new innovations that, at the end of the day, if you're selling products or services, you need somebody to keep track of that for you.
Building on that, the other thing, Liz actually gave a really good example of how you have to understand more than just the accounting. And that becomes the whole example she gave around, well, we needed to learn why craps had such a big increase. And you actually have to understand the business and marketing and all these other aspects that actually happened in there. So as an auditor, part of what you're learning is how do all of these events, non-financial, non-accounting events, actually end up having a financial impact. And when you just mentioned like, well, sometimes wineries have a good year and not, that's the other thing that we really need to think about and learn is like, well, how do I actually start to predict whether we're going to have a good year or a client or a company's going to have a good year or not? And that's really this deeper understanding that we get of cause and effect beyond just the financials. And so learning that skill set really starts to develop your professional judgment. It's this broader understanding of the world. That's one of the things that I feel like compared to, say, my parents or even my relatives or a lot of my friends, I'm like, wait, you don't understand all the things that go in to make this thing happen. Like if we look at a lot of stuff happening today, especially around the economy and the political, like international political stuff, I listen to a lot of that and I'm like, this is so fascinating because of all the interconnections, like the tariffs and all this stuff, right? How does that all actually affect? And in the end, we're the ones as the accountant or the auditor that has to come in and explain, well, this is what happened with the tariffs, and this is how this affected this cost, supply chain and cost or price.
It's very true. And I think I haven't been in accounting quite as long as either of you, but I can say I am very frequently surprised at how much knowledge I have just because of the client work I've done, right? And the people I've talked to, and just in learning, why this business has a strategic advantage and why this other one doesn't, and what they do really well and how they're successful over other brands or companies that do the same thing that are not successful or end up closing. And as an accountant, you see it all. And you have to, like Donny said, you have to understand the different pieces of the business and how it relates back to the financial side. So you end up being almost like a financial interpreter for these companies, in that you speak the language of money, and very quickly you start to get it, because you can see like this transaction, this deal, this whatever, insert whatever word you want here, that a business does has this financial effect, and you get to flow it through. And not only that, you get to understand like underlying GAAP and why it had this financial effect on whether it be, GAAP financial statements, public reporting, or even just cash flow, and understanding like the implications of what that has in each direction. And all of that knowledge comes together to where you start reading the news or like talking to friends, and they say, oh, this thing is happening. And your brain goes, oh, this. Oh, this could happen. Like, I wonder if this is going to happen in the future, like with the tariffs, right? Like there's so many different things that can happen there as a economic response to huge tariffs.
And your friends all look at you like you're crazy, because then they're like, we don't know where your brain just went, but we don't understand.
They're like, wait, how did you get from here to there? And I'm like, yes. Can you think in 6 dimensions?
Yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah, well, and I think, that also goes to the point. I mean, I'm grateful that I did start my career actually in public accounting, because it exposed me to so many different organizations and businesses and even nonprofits. And like that was my favorite part of the start of my career, was learning about all of these businesses and how they operated and how they were profitable or how they weren't, and all of those pieces. It really just created a wide variety of experience very quickly.
Well, I'm just going to call you Moneybags. So
That actually makes me think of Scrooge McDuck.
I could see that.
That's true. Yeah.
Anyways, so thank you guys for sharing your starting accounting stories. I always think it's fascinating to learn like what people did when they got their career start and why it was cool or not cool in some cases. I think we all had great experiences, which is why we're still CPAs, right?
No doubt.
Well, I'm going to caveat that one. I think we all had some intense experiences. Yours especially sounds particularly intense. I'm glad to not have to add 30 minutes. But despite pushing through that, this is where now we're doing things that are so much more richer. So sometimes it is a little bit of, hey, you got to pay a little bit of dues, but the experience you're going to get from it becomes so valuable as you work on other things.
Oh, yeah. No doubt.
Perspective is important too. Sometimes it is hard in 60-hour weeks and grueling moments of detailed reading of whatever's happening to pay attention and understand, okay, this is important. This is a learning experience. And the people that are mentoring me right now are, actually really talented. And there's a lot I can learn from them. So,
no, well said.
Awesome.
Great. Well thanks, guys.
See you all next week.
Thank you.
Okay,
bye.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out more at our website, www.improvetheworld.net. And if you're interested in sharing your own transformation stories, please contact us there.